That was another big night for Donald Trump. He won Florida, Illinois, and North Carolina. John Kasich won his home state of Ohio, and Missouri is still so close that it looks like it's headed to a recount. Trump is now halfway to the number of delegates he needs to sew up the nomination. But conventional wisdom says this thing could still be decided at the convention because the Donald likely will not get to the 1,237 delegates he needs before he gets to Cleveland. But Trump says if he goes into it with a big lead and party officials try to take away the nomination with a brokered convention, it will be a disaster. Here's the Donald.
I think we'll win before getting to the convention, but I can tell you, if we didn't, and if we're 20 votes short, or if we're 100 short, and we're at 1,100 and somebody else is at 500 or 400, because we're way ahead of everybody, I don't think you can say that we don't get it automatically. I think you'd have riots.
And so police in Cleveland might want to get the riot gear ready because Republican officials are already saying it is their decision and not the voters who engaged in primaries.
The rule says specifically that it's a vote of the delegates at the convention to determine if there's a majority.
Voters.
Not a primary vote. Primary votes are not considered. It's the delegates' votes. The delegates cannot vote until they're permanently seated, and that's the first action of the convention.
You know, as I was staying up late last night watching the results come in and waiting for Missouri, which never happened.
Get that yet?
No, it's still not quite in yet. But this is not theoretical at this point. As of last night, the RNC and RNC members were actually floating the trial balloon, trying to take the temperature of the country. What happens if we do it as a brokered convention and take this thing away from Donald Trump? Can they sell it well enough, Brad, so that Republicans won't riot?
No, Republicans are going to riot. I mean, there's going to be a problem. This is going to be bloody warfare. But at the end of the day, my take on it is if Donald Trump doesn't get to 1237 by the time of the convention, he will not be the presidential nominee of the Republican Party. It just won't be. He rose under the Republican Party, and the Republican Party feels that they have to destroy this man. And even if he gets to 1237, they can change the rules, and who knows what could happen.
But, Congressman, there is a threshold at some point where if it gets close enough, it's going to look like they're just taking it away from him, either because they fear what the results will be in November or because they just don't like the guy.
Well, I think there's a couple of points that need to be made right away. Because all of the rules, the 1237 requirement existing now in the Republican convention rules, and the rule that says you need to win 8 primaries to be the nominee in the convention, those would not allow for a Kasich or other people, or even a Trump today, to win if he doesn't get that 1237 number. But the good news for Republicans is they can always change the rules at the convention, so that's a good thing. But here's the important point, I think, for everybody to acknowledge. Donald Trump, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and if it's unintentional, it's coincidentally a lot of these things, where he appears to incite people to violence by saying there will be a riot. He also said bad things will happen. Even if I don't get the 1237 number, that's the rule now. If I don't get it, there'll be riots, there'll be bad things happening. That is unacceptable for anybody. You teach your children inciting violence is unacceptable unless it's war. This ain't a war. This is a presidential primary which is designed to avoid physical conflict. That's why we have a democracy.
But Dominic, that threat might make a few delegates or a few RNC members think twice about changing those rules.
You know, Andrew, I have to be completely honest. I say bravo to you, Congressman, for pointing that out, because in terms of, I don't think we should use the word riot lightly. I've been in riots in Crown Heights. It's not a pretty sight. And so basically what Mr. Trump is saying is, I'm the man. My way or the highway.
Yeah.
If you don't do it my way, I'm going to tell my people to riot. That's disgusting. It should never come from a potential nominee of a party. What Mr. Trump is saying is the equivalent of this. Who won? Gore, Bush, who won the popular vote? I'm asking you.
Al Gore won the popular vote.
So if there's anybody that should say that, you know, hey, I had the popular vote, I should be the president of the United States. Did it go down that way?
No.
It went down based on the rules, right?
Right, which didn't change.
Okay, but wait. So are we supposed to change the rules because Donald Trump, with the illusion of a billionaire, says it should be that way? Notice I said illusion. the illusion of all these billions. Because he says it, the rules should change?
Well, but you're talking about the difference between election law and a party's.
Here's the point with this. If they do this, whatever the rules are internally in the party, I don't know them. If they do this, and he appears to be the choice of the majority of Republican voters, they're going to be committing an act of political suicide. For years and years and years, the Republicans have been complaining that they can't get new voters in there. They can't get back the Reagan Democrats. They can't get back the centrists. He is bringing unconventional people into the Republican Party, people like me who may support him under some circumstances. If the perception is that they are taking away what he has rightfully earned, they are going to lose all credibility. They're going to antagonize and alienate the people there, bringing it to the
how have you
and they
right,
haven't won anything since 2004.
Counselor, you're
And
right.
they're gonna give
You're
the
right.
election
You're
Hillary
right about
Clinton.
energizing the base, bringing in new voters. If the rules say 1237 delegates.
Close enough.
If he doesn't have 1237, how do you just say,
has-
oh, the rules don't count?
The rules count, but if he has 1,200 and you're going to deny him or attempt to deny him and deny the popular will on the basis of some technicality, you're going to look awful. And forget about a riot. What he will do, no matter what he says, is run as a third-party candidate and give the election to Hillary Clinton.
But one
That's
more-
what will
but
happen.
one more
And he
thing-
should do that.
But one thing we have to point out is when you say if you change the rules, the question is if the Republicans at the convention elected delegates or the superdelegates or both vote to change the rules by majority vote in their Republican convention, then that arguably is the will of the majority of the Republican political establishment who have made a judgment, if they do this, that Donald Trump would be a worse disaster than if they go outside, if they pick someone else like a Kasich, or if they go outside of those who ran for this office. It is a totally intra-Republican Party fight, and they're going to have to work it out.
And this is not a constitutional thing. This is not an election law. They can change
just
the rules
stupid.
whenever
It's
they
just
want
stupid.
to. But Congressman, I'm curious because in your party structure, you have a mechanism in place for this. Superdelegates. You were a superdelegate, I believe
right.
you were. And so it's actually baked into the fabric of the Democratic Party that there's a mechanism for yanking an unpalatable nominee away, or doing the same thing that Republicans are talking about doing to Trump. What's the difference?
There is no difference in the sense that if it is seen that those in the establishment of either party go against the popular will of the majority in that party, then that will have consequences for that party's loyal base, whether they'll show up or not. But at the end of the day, you want the smartest and folks in your party to help you make that decision. Now, the Trump voters may just be the loudest folks participating in the Republican primaries. They do not constitute the majority of Republicans. They won a bunch of primaries with 35%, 45%, 25%, but they're not the majority of Republican voters. The people who go to the Republican convention, I would argue, will represent the majority of Republican voters, whether those voters voted in the primary or not, and they want their Republican Party to be successful, and they want, therefore, the best candidate they can put up.
All right, we'll take a break. Up next, whether you like it or not, it looks like it's going to be Trump versus Hillary, but what happens when the majority of people in each party dislike their nominees? It's uncharted territory, but it looks like we're going to find out.